I played in local bands before that, but when I started playing with Ozzy, I was thrown right into playing stadiums. I played with him at one of my first shows. In the history of heavy metal, Jake E. Lee's name has never come up very often. He never broke guitars on stage, got into bar fights that made the news, or talked about having a million views. After Randy Rhoads' death, he wrote Bark at the Moon, the song that made Ozzy Osbourne famous again. Also, his name was quietly taken off the written credits, and he disappeared from the public eye without saying a word. Jake never needed titles. He was already very good, so he didn't need that extra attention. He only brought his guitar and a fearless silence with him on his more than 40-year trip. Others were after the spotlight, but Jake decided to stay out of the way. Others were shouting to be heard, but he just played his guitar and let it speak. What happened to Jake E. Lee, a talented artist who was once called the bridge between Randy Rhoads and Zakk Wylde? He didn't come back for decades. When people talk about great guitarists, why doesn't someone who helped shape the sound of a key period in Ozzy's career come up more often? His quiet but rough life, where the lights never quite managed to hide the scars behind it, holds the answer. Beginnings. Jake E. Lee was born in Norfolk, Virginia, on February 15, 1957. His real name was Jakey Lou Williams. In a time when racism was still common in America, the fact that his mother was Japanese and his father was Welsh was very unusual. Jake was a child when his family moved to San Diego. During those early years, he quietly lived in two different worlds where he didn't really fit in either one. Jake was picked on a lot at school because he looked Asian, especially because he had narrow eyes and a unique skin tone. Once, he said that he had always felt out of place, like he wasn't American enough to be fully accepted or Japanese enough to fully understand where his mother came from. This made him shy away, think a lot, and feel cut off from the world except through music. Jake's strict and moral mother made him start learning classical piano when he was 6 years old. For years, Jake practiced for hours every day, even though he wasn't allowed to listen to rock music or have dreams that a guitarist who didn't just play fast, but also thought deeply about rhythm, structure, and melodic depth would grow out of that background, though. Jake quietly learned to play the guitar when he was 13. He played the six-string instrument instead of the piano because it made him feel freer than the piano ever could. He started to like bands like Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, and Ritchie Blackmore that his mom would never let him play in the house. Jacob did not ask. His only job was to play and listen as much as possible. Jake slowly made his own way out of being a kid who had to follow strict rules. There was no outburst of rebellion in his words or actions. He picked quiet as his shield and music as his weapon. Jake E. became who he is today because of those years of discipline and being alone. Lee, who was quiet, free, and different from everyone else. For a while, Jake E. Lee didn't make a big splash in the rock world. There was no million-dollar deal or show that went viral. It was a quiet and hard start to his work, just like the man himself. Jake learned to play the guitar when he was a teenager. He then joined a few local bands in San Diego and used them as stepping stones. By the late 1970s, he had decided to leave home and go to Los Angeles, which was where all young guitarists thought their dreams could begin. LA wasn't friendly, though. There are a lot of bands and faces all trying to get your attention. Later, Jake played for Mickey Rat, an early version of the glam metal band that would become Rat. He had first joined a band called Teasered. He only stayed for a short time, but it helped him get better on stage and gave him access to the Sunset Strip's underground scene, where musicians like George Lynch, Warren DeMartini, and Eddie Van Halen had made their names. Later, Jake joined Rough Cut, a band that Wendy Dio, wife of Ronnie James Dio, manages. This was a turning point because Wendy put Jake in touch with Sharon Osbourne at a time when Ozzy was looking for a new guitarist to replace Randy Rhoads, who had died in a plane crash. It was quiet and stressful at the interview. Jake was asked to compete against highly regarded musician George Lynch. After the fact, Ozzy said he was very confused because both were so great. But at a crucial practice, Jake played a new riff that no one had ever heard before. He looked at Sharon and said, "This guy is crazy, and I like it." Jake landed the job. They did it not because they wanted to be famous, but because they were quietly brave that he pushed the guitar to its limits while still being in charge. That was just what Ozzy needed after losing Randy Rhoads, who was so heartbreaking. From being a player who was hiding in the shadows of local clubs, Jake E. Lee now plays in the middle of heavy metal, where every mistake is seen clearly. Fear kept him from doing what he knew was right. There were no big words or fake thrills, just a calm hold on the guitar. He is ready to write the best book of his life. His name would be taken out of the credits for the first record, Success Career, which was very sad. When Bark at the Moon came out in 1983, it was Jake E. Lee's first public performance as Ozzy Osbourne's lead guitarist. The album's sound changed. It became sharper and more modern, mixing old-school metal riffs with more complicated musical ideas. Jake left his mark on everything, from the steady beats to the high-flying solos, from the rock and roll rebel to the center of Forever. Still, there was only one name on the written credits: Ozzy Osbourne. When Jake was in Rough Cut, he started working on guitar ideas that would later become the title track and most famous song on the record. Jake gave a direct answer when asked why his name wasn't written with as well. The deal was given to me. I had to sign it because Sharon told me I would lose my job if I didn't. He lost all rights to write songs because of that deal. Because Jake signed, he didn't get any income or credit as a co-creator, and he couldn't sue anyone. It was decades later that Bark at the Moon was still thought of as Ozzy's work, even though a quiet guitarist with long hair played most of the music. Even so, Jake didn't give up. He later worked with Ozzy on the 1986 album The Ultimate Sin, which had a more glam metal sound. Very popular song was Shot in the Dark. Its video played all the time on MTV, and the show sold out everywhere in the world. For Jake, playing the guitar on stage was like talking to his soul. His style wasn't like Rhodes. His style wasn't too formal, and it wasn't like Zakk Wylde's. There was neither heavy-handed swagger nor showy acting. Jake played sharply and precisely, as if he had been hurt. He didn't waste a single note. And just as the lights went out, there was another blow. Jake found out he was fired by reading the news after the Ultimate Sin tour. No message or call. One day, the news just said that Zakk Wylde had become Ozzy Osbourne's new guitarist. Jake ended up. No reasons given. His spot was taken away a second time, this time by Sharon Osbourne, the same person who had once talked him into giving up his rights. Jake left quietly, without a fuss or a lawsuit. He was just as quiet when he got there. But he was deeply hurt by that silence. It wasn't that he had lost his job. It was that the hard work and love he had put into the music were never fully recognized. Still, Jake didn't let his anger take over him. He decided not to stick with a big name and instead started from scratch by making his own band, Badlands. Jake had to make that risky choice because it was the only way to keep the one thing he had left in the cruel world of rock: his honor. Backlashes are the silent hits that destroy faith. Jake E. Lee didn't decide to stay quiet forever after leaving Ozzy Osbourne's band. He started the classic hard rock band Badlands in 1988, based on raw power and pure purpose. The band's vocalists were Ray Gillen, who had been a temporary singer for Black Sabbath, Eric Singer, drummer, who would later become famous with Kiss, and Greg Chison, bassist. This was the project that Jake put all of his faith in. With no limits or unfair agreements, music can be enjoyed in its simplest form. Many people liked their first record, Badlands, 1989. Instead of going with the glam metal style that was all over MTV, Badlands played heavy rock with bluesy undertones that reminded me of Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti era. Critics said that Jake's guitar playing was very good and that Ray Gillen's singing were powerful. However, just as the band found its voice, grunge music became popular, making room for bands like Badlands that were known for being honest. Voodoo Highway, the band's second record, released in 1991, pushed their creativity even further, but problems within the group started to show. As the label put more pressure on Jake to change the band's sound to fit changing market tastes, tensions grew between Ray and the other members over artistic direction. But Jake said no. He didn't want to copy Soundgarden or Alice in Chains any more than they did. He didn't care if staying true to his art meant losing sales. After that came the worst blow. Jake's bandmate and friend Ray Gillen was stricken with AIDS. Ray was the voice of the songs Jake had written from the heart. Ray could no longer play or record as his illness got worse. It was only 34 years ago that he died in December 1993. People who knew Jake, well, said he was broken, but he didn't say anything public or give interviews. He was upset not only because he had lost a friend, but also all hope that the band could keep going with just music. Jake pretty much stopped being in music after Ray's death. He said no to requests to work with other artists, to interviews. into putting out any albums. His absence from events and shows lasted for almost 10 years. People said he had retired, become depressed, or gotten a normal job to make ends meet. No one was sure, though, because Jake never told them. Suddenly, he stopped talking. Not until 1996 did Jake quietly put out a solo album called Fine Pink Mist. It was an instrumental record that didn't get much attention and was like a letter to people who still knew who he was. After that, he was seen again in February 2005 and then disappeared again. Then, after years of quiet, Jake E. Lee's name showed up out of nowhere in a Las Vegas news story in 2024. He was shot more than once while walking his dog near his house. No one knows why Jake was hurt so badly that he had to be taken to the hospital right away with injuries to his arm, leg, and back. Thankfully, none of the bullets hit his critical organs. The man once again lived in silence. When asked if he was mad afterward, Jake's answer sent chills up my spine. Multiple times, I've been hit. They had never done one with a real gun before. Not a fit. Do not yell. Jake E. Lee was eerily quiet through all of life's blows. The pain may be greater than any scream because of the silence. Everyday life. A lot of the time, artists put their private lives on display on magazine covers or social media pages. Lee has always been a quiet, different figure. He doesn't post dinner selfies with famous people. Many people don't know who he dates, where he lives, or what his family situation is. Jake has been in the music business for more than 40 years, but he has never been married, doesn't have any kids, and hasn't been public with any relationships very often. Others see that as a life without meaning. Jake, on the other hand, can do it. A long time ago, he lived in a simple house outside of Las Vegas. That seemed to be the only place that made him feel calm. There are no fans or reporters around. It was just him, his dogs, some old amps, and a bunch of guitars hanging on the walls that I don't like being around lots of people. Networking in my field isn't something I'm good at. He said, I just won a live, in a rare interview in the early 2000s. A lot of his fans and fellow singers have said they wish he had stayed in the spotlight longer. Jake, on the other hand, has never looked back. He was good enough without a crowd. Following betrayals in the music business, being erased by Ozzy, and being fired without a word, Jake learned to stay away from things that aren't related to music. He wasn't weak because he was quiet, it was defense. He knew that the more you say, the more likely you are to get hurt. Some said he was addicted during his long absence. Others said he lost all of his money. Though the truth was easier to see, there was no trouble for Jake. He wrote and played more. Luckily, he didn't tell anyone to him. Live streams weren't necessary for art. Real music was what you could hear in a quiet room at 2 a.m. when no one was there to listen or judge. There was one thing that Jake would always be connected to, the guitar. Like some people take care of their partner, he cleaned, adjusted, and restrung his instruments on a regular basis. One guitar he's kept for more than 30 years. Even though the paint is coming off and the wood is cracked, it's never been traded in for a younger model or sold. Older than him, but never cheated on himself. For Jake Lee, love may not have been about a certain woman. It was love for being free, for peace, and for music that wasn't affected by sales or fashion. Honestly, he didn't live alone because no one needed him. He did it because all he really wanted was silence, which society couldn't give him, legacy and power. Jake E. Lee's name might not stand out if you only look at the charts or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. His solo records haven't gone platinum. There is no star for him on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Big guitar companies never made him the face of their business. But Jake E. Lee is one of the most well-liked guitar players in the world. Simply because he is sincere, not because he is popular. When asked what makes Jake unique, many artists, from Zakk Wylde to John 5 and Dimebag Darrell, gave the same answer that it was his special skill to mix feeling, skill, and rhythm in a way that no one else could. There was more to Jake's shred than just vanity. He did not race across the fretboard to show who was the best. It was like every riff he played was a short story with a start, a build-up, and a finish that left people speechless. His musical skills are still clear in Bark at the Moon, even though his name was taken off the credits. The high, dramatic, but classically based solos gave Ozzy's sound a whole new taste. Real fans know that Jake was the heart and soul of that record, even if no one else is acknowledged for it. Badlands showed a different side of Jake, not just as a guitarist, but also as a bandleader and songwriter. Badlands was one of the best bands of the 1980s and 1990s, but they didn't get enough attention because of grunge. For its structure and emotional depth, their first album has been compared positively to Appetite for Destruction and Led Zeppelin 4. But Badlands never had the chance to become famous like those legendary songs did because they were forgotten before they were fully understood. Exactly like Jake. A lot of what Jake did for rock music has been quietly changed, which is a sad fact. When looking at Ozzy's musicians on Wikipedia, his name is sometimes just a passing mention. He doesn't show up to many return shows, but his sound lives on in the way a new breed of guitarists play, how they handle melody, and the unspoken recognition that no one has ever played like Jake and never will. For Jake E. Lee, being successful doesn't mean getting awards. You are part of the DNA of a whole field without being called a legend. Even though he doesn't have a statue, his impact can be felt in every recording and riff, like the softest voice in a room that makes everyone stop and listen. Right now, life. In October 2024, Jake E. Lee had to make a big decision after living alone for years. Early in the morning, he was shot 3 times while walking his dog near his Las Vegas home. He was hit in the arm, the leg, and the back. He broke a rib and hurt his lung when he was shot in the back. Luckily, none of the bullets hit any important organs, and he was taken to urgent care while still being conscious. After getting better, Jake said that the event happened when he stopped 2 thieves from stealing a neighbor's motorcycle. Even though he tried to calm things down by talking, things quickly got out of hand and guns were drawn. Right now, Jake E. Lee is still getting better and has started playing guitar again. He said he was going to finish the long-postponed Patina tour with his band Red Dragon Cartel. The tour had been put off because of the COVID-19 plague. Even though he had been told he had carpal tunnel syndrome before, more tests showed that the problem was cartilage loss in his right hand. Instead of getting surgery, Jake learned to play with his elbows moving more and found his own way to deal with the pain. Even with all of his problems and setbacks, Jake E. Lee stays positive and is truly committed to music. He keeps making things and performing them, showing that real love doesn't fade. It lasts in his quest for fame. Jake E. Lee never came out on top. People didn't credit him on the song he wrote. He was fired when he was at his best. His most emotional band broke up, and he lost a musical soulmate way too soon. But he never lost his personality, even after all the things he had lost. Jake was one of the most honest guitarists, but he was never the best, most popular, or best-selling. Some people bend over to follow the crowd, but Jake stopped being himself when he felt like he had to. Others talked about their accomplishments, but he let his guitar do the talking. Even though the radio was full of noise, he made melodies that were strong enough to hear in quiet. Jake E. Lee's life shows that not everyone who is centrally located is really bright. Sometimes light comes from behind, like when someone keeps the spark going in the background, for no reason, not for money or fame, but because life without music is dull. Jake came back after being alone as a child, giving up a job, and even being shot, which could have ended it all. He played his guitar again even though his hand was hurt. He turned down surgery, choosing to play through the pain instead. Because for him, making music isn't a job, it's a way to make a living. Even though there isn't a statue of Jake E. Lee, he's still there every time Bark at the Moon plays or a young guitarist tries to mix speed and feeling, skill and expression. There's no stage or applause, just one person who really gets it. During what time period did you remember Jake the most? During his fiery years with Ozzy or during his deepening splits with Badlands? Tell us what you think in the space below. Remember to like, subscribe, and ring the bell if you love stories about artists who don't need the attention but still leave a light behind. That way you won't miss the next moving trip. We appreciate you watching all the way through.